pressured now. So for those who have heard me before, I'm kind of into Gettysburg a little bit. I belong to the Gettysburg Foundation, as does Charlie. I volunteered there last summer. It's a great place. And for me, Gettysburg is a great place because of the human stories. You know, how the artifacts, the turn of the soil, a monument, you know, everything tells a story. And I thought today would just be an experience in sharing some Gettysburg stories. I'm hopefully taking you to some places in the battlefield maybe you haven't been or hadn't spent much time on, and taking some popular places and maybe showing a different flavor to it. Again, just trying to add to our richness of the Battle of Gettysburg. I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, it's such a well-published historical event, it's hard to find new flavors, but I hope I found some for you. So you ready? All right, so, oops, did my mic go out? We good? Any guys eating there? Pretty good food, hey? Did you have the peanut soup? Outstanding. I'll drive. Let's go. You know, I love going there. It's a great place to sit. So I'll have lunch there. Outdoor eating is about here. When you walk by this wall, there are, 110 bullet holes, I believe. And talk about a tangible moment realizing what truly happened at that event. So anyway, long story short, I'm there last summer. I'm volunteering at the visitor center, having a blast. I have a friend, which may be surprising. And my friend says, I got a buddy you got to meet. And this buddy hands me this Civil War musket. Oh, that's really cool. Thanks for, okay, I like it. It was loaded when it was discovered. Okay, the story gets even better. This gun was found in the attic of the then Sweeney house, now called the Farnsworth house. I'm like, this is getting better. Now you think about the history of that. A loaded musket left on the battlefield by a Confederate soldier. There's a story in itself, does it not? Kind of excites the imagination. This is the letter that came along with it from the guy who found it. After the battle, of course, the people of the town cleaned up all the debris. And the guy cleaning out the Sweeney house found this musket, and you can see it says right here. 3 days later, the rifle was taken out of the rebel sharpshooters through something in the old Sweeney property on Baltimore Street. There's proof it came from there. Now here with the imagination, what his story comes, you can take it as you want. We've all know the Jenny Wade story, correct? Jenny Wade, the only civilian killed during the Battle of Gettysburg and stuff like that. This is the side of the house that's facing the Sweeney house. Now the fatal bullet is right here, it's well marked, but do you notice all the other damage along the facade of that house? When you look at where the Sweeney house garret is and you look at the Wade house, it's in direct line of sight. I will never say this was the gun that killed it, that killed Jenny Wade. But don't you kind of make a historical assumption that this musket was probably aimed in that general direction? And so that was just fascinating to tie two pieces of the Gettysburg story together with an artifact. Now, if you look at this picture, this is a shot taken through the fatal bullet hole, and Jenny Wade was standing right about here. Now, the buddy told me this story, and I haven't corroborated it. He said that a while ago, someone did some forensic studies and did a laser pointer and tried to figure out the angle of where the bullet was fired, and it was in the general area of the Sweeney house. So how's that for an introduction to my lecture? Yeah, he wouldn't let me keep the musket. No idea why. All right, so Little Round Top, I go there a lot. It's my favorite breakfast spot. I'll stop at McDonald's, get 2 breakfast burritos, a large Diet Coke with hot sauce. And I'll get out at Little Round Top pre-dawn and just sit there and watch Gettysburg open up before me as I'm just enjoying the sunrise. It's a beautiful place, not just historically, but just geographically. And then I'll go off and do my Civil War studies. This is the monument to the 127th Pennsylvania. This is a monument I've driven by more times than I can count and have never stopped by. So when I put this presentation together, I was like, I don't want to talk about the 16th Michigan or the 20th Maine. Let's find something new. All right, 147th Pennsylvania. So something about them that I think is interesting is on July 1st, from about 5 o'clock into about 2 o'clock in the morning, John Geary's division of the Union 12th Corps actually occupied this area. Some of us know that. And I think it's cool to think about those fields of Gettysburg before the battle as troops were maneuvering. Here's the 147th Pennsylvania of Geary's division on the north side of Little Round Top. And according to the captain, I'd like to read an account for you, they were on picket duty. Let me share this with you. This one comes from Captain Moore. Quote, "The 147th was ordered out on picket duty for the night. It was advanced several hundred yards to the front near the Emmitsburg Road on rough, rocky ground and occupied a stone fence as its protection. The regiment, though tired and wearied by long and forced marches, stood alert and vigilant, waiting for coming day against the old enemy. For those who've been to Gettysburg, the stone walls I best equate are probably near the Trossel farm. There's all those stone walls there. And you think about this July 1st, before the chaos of July 2nd shows up. Captain Moore and his picket line are standing in pristine Pennsylvania landscape. And 24 hours later, what happened to it? Now, we'll come back to the 147th Pennsylvania later. You can see their monument is right up here on the corner of the road. There's only one unfortunate thing. When I go out there this summer to volunteer again, I can't go visit that monument. Anyone know why? You know why. Yep. It's closed. If you look at this yellowed area, this is Little Round Top. This is closed for the next 12 or 18 months. This place has seen a lot of decay because of the constant traffic. There's a lot of erosion issues, the parking issues, a lot of issues. The Park Service has amassed about $12 million to rehab Little Round Top to protect it, because their job is to keep Little Round Top the way it's supposed to be, way past our lives. And at this rate, the degradation is affecting the visual and affecting the park. And so if you look at it, for those who have been there, this whole area is out of it, including where the 147th PA is. If you've ever driven South Confederate Avenue, you can no longer drive that for the next year. Devil's Den, which is this an image of, this will be closed periodically for the next 6 to 8 months as well, because first off, people are falling off the edge of it, and this whole walkway is kind of a dangerous place. They're rehabbing that, making it a better venue, even to the point where the traditional driving route has been modified, if you can see up on top. It's going to be tougher to get to the wheat field, tougher to get to the Bushman farm and stuff like that. And so I won't be able to go to the 147th Pennsylvania Monument for quite some time. Am I glad it's happening? Absolutely. For those of us who've been there, you understand my point. So this is a better detail of what Little Round Top rehabilitation is looking like. You can see here's the Park Road, Sykes Avenue. You see these little orange spaces? They are creating assembly areas where guides or bus tours can meet and not hurt the landscape. So it's a more central thing. They're establishing more controlled pathways, including offering some pathways. Have any of you ever walked the TAC route of the 5th Texas from the base up? I've done that before. It's not enjoyable because it's so rocky, but they're putting a formal path in there so that you and I can walk the route of the Confederates as they go up towards the 16th Michigan. So they're improving our visitation while also protecting the park. One thing I think is really cool too, to the lower right, they're putting in an orientation building with bathrooms, parking, classrooms, and stuff like that, making it an even better venue for you and I to enjoy. This is a close-up of the top of it, and you can see the visiting or the assembly areas, improving parking. So don't go to Little Round Top this year. You won't get there. Okay? All right, so let's go to the entire opposite side of the battlefield. How many of you are familiar with the first shot story? Okay, would you mind telling it, Charlie, real quick?
I'm going to let you go. You go ahead.
Would you like it in an Irish accent? Well, there's these lads up there sitting there. No. So we know the story. 8th Illinois Cavalry, morning of July 1st. This is a forward picket post. They see Confederates coming down. Levi Scheffler turns to his office and says, hey, there's Rebs. Marcellus Jones says, may I borrow your carbine, sir? Lays the carbine on the fence, am I getting it right? And fires the first shot of the Battle of Gettysburg. This is the marker put up by those guys. This is what the house looked like during the Battle of Gettysburg. And you can see the monument, see where I'm circling here? You can see what it looked like. It's an 1880s photograph. I share that with you because when you look at this thing, it's a way deeper story than just that. So on July 1st, when the Confederates were advancing, they had no cavalry. So what do? They take a battery called the Fredericksburg Artillery out of Fredericksburg, Virginia, captained by Captain Marie, you know Marie's Heights. They shag out those guns to fire at the declivities, at the different areas, trying to shake up and see if there's something out there, because they don't have eyes on. Well, Ephraim Whistler, a blacksmith and owner of the house, he walks out and for the disturbance. A shell lands right in front of his house. He is knocked unconscious. He never reawakens. He dies on August 11th. Jenny Wade was the only civilian killed at the Battle of Gettysburg. but I think we have to recognize Ephraim Whistler as probably the first civilian mortally wounded because of the Battle of Gettysburg. And all of that takes place right here. So when I was there last summer, oops, I just stole my own thunder. That's what it looked like. This is what it looks like now. Isn't that amazing? They are giving us a more visual experience at Gettysburg. Now, there's actually some parking, but you can go there and see the Whistler home, how it more looked than we've seen it in the last whatever kinds of years. So these are the incredible changes happening at Gettysburg as we sit here in Wisconsin. So I hope that helps a bit. This is the Peace Light Memorial, dedicated in 1938, cost us $60,000. It is Maine granite and Alabama limestone to unify the country. When FDR spoke there were over 250,000 spectators. You can see the image here. That said there were over 100,000 spectators who couldn't get there because the traffic was so bad. This was a major event, and I share that with you because the Park Service is always massaging the battlefield, trying to improve it for various reasons. This is a story of them in 1930s making an adjustment. So this is, to the left, the 9th New York Cavalry Monument. You can see the Peace Light Memorial. Now, looking at that photograph, this would have been filled with spectators in the image I shared previous. This is what it looked like before the dedication. This is the John Forney farm. John Forney farm was there at the time of the battle. It had battle damage. How many of you are familiar with Iverson's attack? Iverson's pit. Iverson's North Carolinians attacked from this position across the field. It was reported that Iverson probably stayed by this house instead of going with his brigade forward. So what happened is the Park Service decided that it was impeding the vista of the Peace Light Memorial. It was a decayed building, as you can see, and they opted to remove it. And so you can see the building would have been right about there. So sad or right, whatever the case may be, the Forney farm is no longer there. But if you go inside the visitor center and you walk up to that beautiful 12-pound Napoleon, you do a 180 and you look up, you will see what one cannonball can do to floor joists. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? And these came from the John Forney farm. So when you're driving around past the 9th New York and you see that open space, you now know what it looked like, and then you go to the visitor center and you see what I'm trying to do here, connecting all the history. When you look at the artifacts and the places, the stories all show up. You guys good?
Yes.
Should I share some more? Okay. Good news, I have more. Small painting there, have you guys seen this? What, 377 feet around, 42 feet tall, weighs 12.5 ton. By the way, paint's heavy. Beautiful painting, 2008, returned to its glory, an amazing visual. Every time I'm there, I make sure to see it at least once because when I was working and volunteering, I would tell, like, if you had never been to Gettysburg before, right? My suggestion would be go to the cyclorama, put those images in your head, and then go out onto the battlefield. Transfer the artistry to these peaceful green fields you're going to walk around. And that was kind of my premise too, because isn't the painting alive in action? And we take that to it. So when I was out there last summer, I had someone I heard on a podcast, they said, bring a pair of binoculars with you. Like, okay, I'll listen to anyone. And I brought a pair of binoculars. Now, I've borrowed these images from various sources, but with binoculars, you can get intimately close with the painting, down to the brush strokes. Anyone know who this gentleman is? Say it louder, brother.
Looks like Lincoln.
It is Lincoln. When Paul Philippato put together the Gettysburg painting, he wanted to put Lincoln in there as an ode to a fallen hero, the 16th president of our country. So reportedly, that is Abraham Lincoln. When you go to Gettysburg and they finish the program, they usually point this one out. But with binoculars, do you see how intimate you can get with it? This is the artist. This is Paul Philippato. He and a team of artists painted 4 versions of the Gettysburg cyclorama. This one comes from Boston. And so instead of signing it, he painted himself in it. That's pretty common, and they talk about that too if you've been there. But this one's even cooler. What would happen is they would have, like, you'd be the expert at horses. That's all you did is paint horses. You are the master of the shrubbery. Sounds like a Monty Python skit. But you would work on the shrubberies. This gentleman was the landscape artist. Salvador, Vijay, or Wedgie, I'm not sure the pronunciation. Now, I think this is an amazing tell on Salvador's part. If you look at his sling carefully, for his wound, he has earth tone paints all over his sling. That's his tell. That's his way of saying, I was the landscape artist. And that's the kind of stuff you can see when you take a pair of binoculars with you and you enjoy the moment. So what a great way of telling us that he painted all the beautiful landscapes. So, anyone know who this is? Alonzo Cushing and Sergeant Fugger right here. When you're so far away, you can't see it. Again, with the binoculars, you can see it really well. Now, I borrowed this next image from a book on the cyclorama, which is amazing. The artist actually had figures that they had penciled in that they never finished painting. And if you look carefully with the binoculars, you can kind of see those. And that's kind of a neat flavor. If you go, any you guys going to Gettysburg this summer? Take me. I'm available all summer. I would recommend going on one of these dates. And the only reason I say that is the Gettysburg Foundation has a program called An Evening with the Painting. And for 2 hours, first you go to this really good program where they give you the history of the painting, give you the background about how they refurbished it. It's a really fascinating story, but then you can get intimate. You can see the brush strokes. You're right next to it. You can see, oh yeah, that's me by the way. You can see the three-dimensional elements that make that painting alive for us today. Look at the scale of how big that man is by comparison with the too heavy guy below it. It is really, it's one of the cooler programs they have there. So it's called An Evening with the Painting. There are the dates, highly recommended. And I'll be out there anyway, so thanks for the visit. All right. Since we are not able to go to Little Round Top, since Devil's Den is hot and cold, and since the wheat field might be tough, I thought it might be interesting to take us to places that maybe we don't frequent as often, that aren't the common places, because Little Round Top is the most popular spot to go to. This is the first one I want to visit. This, of course, is East Cemetery Ridge. On July 1st, this is the fallback position of the Union 1st and 11th Corps. This is where they make that last stand to start developing that fishhook defensive position we know so well in our history. You can imagine the chaos of this place. Now, why is this place important? Partially because of this road right here. This is the Baltimore Pike. The Baltimore Pike is the primary supply line for the Army of the Potomac. Their primary base is in Westminster. If the Confederates break or take the Baltimore Pike, the Union Army has to retire from that position. It becomes all important. So as we're developing this idea, you can see what's happening here. So let's advance one moment here. On July 2nd, about 9 p.m., as you can see from the small map to the left, 2 Confederate brigades begin their assault. We know the assault began originally, Wheatfield, Devil's Den, that whole thing, Peach Orchard. Now it's moving this way. 2 brigades attack from this position. Louisianans actually get in and amongst Weidrich's battery of the 1st New York. Tremendous hand-to-hand fighting here as Weidrich's gunners are using swabs, everything to get their hands on to try to defend their battery. And so we can't go to Little Round Top, but to stand by this lunette and listen to this account and try to place your imagination to what I'm about to share with you. This comes from J. Warren Jackson, 9th Louisiana. I felt as if my doom was sealed, and it was a great reluctance I started my skirmishers forward. Old Harry Hayes shouted forward, and on we went over fences, ditches, through marshy fields, and we fetched up at a stone fence behind which Mr. Yank had posted himself, and he did not want to leave, but with bayonets and club guns we drove them back. By the time it was dark, we couldn't tell whether we were shooting at our own men or not. Some of our men went up to the battery. The color bearer, Leon Gussman, carried the colors up to the battery and planted them on the breastwork. He was wounded and taken prisoners. Our colors were lost. So what a great story to take with you as you see that part. Quick tangent, on the evening of July 2nd, it was a 98% full moon. So it wasn't a pitch black no moon night, but it certainly was a dark night for the soldiers who fought there. And so go there, East Cemetery Ridge, more stories than that, but just one more. This is the right flank marker of the 107th Ohio. As you can see, the 25th Ohio, they were right about here. Before 2016, it was really awkward to walk up here because there was a lady doing dishes right there. And so it was awkward. Well, in 2016, the Battlefield Trust bought the property, have torn all this down, and now you can step up, and you heard the account about the Clum muskets pushing the Yanks away. That happened right here, and you get a better understanding of the battle because of all the improvements to the park itself. Doing okay? Any questions so far? Then I'll hit the next button. Boom. This is Benner's Hill. Benner's Hill is about a 500-foot elevation. It is just north and a touch west of the town of Gettysburg. And so if you go to July 1st, Heath's division is coming from the top of the screen down towards Gettysburg. Ewell's corps is advancing from the right to the left, heading towards Culps Hill, which is about in this area. On July 1st, remember Ewell got an order from Lee saying, take that hill if practicable, right, if possible. So here's Ewell, completely blind, no Confederate cavalry to warn him, no flank security, no idea what he's getting into. He gets a report that there are Federal skirmishers to the west of Benner's Hill. Because of that piece of information, he has to detach an entire brigade of Virginians, reducing his force. So you start to see what happens with Ewell's decision-making when things like this start happening, these little elements, thanks to Benner's Hill. It's a beautiful vision, isn't it, to see Benner's Hill? How many of you guys have been to Benner's Hill? Yeah, see, only two. That's my point. It's one of those little-known places that has a tremendous story. All right. On July 2nd, as the grand assault going in echelon from the wheat field all the way around is going to happen, Allegheny Johnson's division will attack Culps Hill. Here's Culps Hill, about 1,000 yards away. East Cemetery Ridge is about 1,500 yards away, and this is Benner Hill. This is Joseph Latimer. Joseph Latimer is the artillery battalion commander for Johnson's division. He is told that he will have to put his 16 guns on this ridge and suppress the Union fire on Culps, Stevens Knoll, and East Cemetery Ridge. So what he does is, before the attack, he goes up there and he finds a couple of things here. Number one, he is at a lower elevation than Culps Hill and East Cemetery Ridge. That is plunging fire. He is at a disadvantage already because he's below the Federal guns. Number two is it's a pretty narrow spit of land, which means he can't move his battery. So if he has a battery here and the Feds find the target, he can't move them. So they have to endure whatever fire there is. Doesn't matter. At 4 o'clock, he runs his 16 guns up on Benner's Hill. Brilliant guy. He takes his smoothbores, which have less range, closer to Culps Hill. He takes his rifled guns right about here, including 20-pounders, at greater distance, so he can use all 16 guns effectively. Now, for the next hour and a half, he is firing, try to suppress the Federal guns here. Oh, by the way, there are 37 Federal guns against his 16. This is the position that Joseph Latimer's battalion was put in on July 2nd. Regardless, he fights valiantly. He tries to do it. At one point, he begs permission to withdraw his battalion. He is given permission to withdraw all but 4 guns. Somehow 4 will make the magical difference. Now, I want to share an account to give you a kind of a sensory detail what it was like to be up there. This comes from a member of the 1st Maryland Artillery, CS. At 4 o'clock, our battery decided to line the line of battle and rolled our guns into position on a hill east of Gettysburg. The whole artillery battalion opened fire as fast as the guns could be gotten into position, and a storm of shell greeted us the moment our gun first fired. It seemed the enemy had gotten the range of the hill even before we fired, and were expecting us to occupy the position and were watching for us. Solid shots were whistling by us, striking amongst a few scattered bunches of trees along the hillside and tearing up the ground in several places. The shells were bursting over us, around us, among us, keeping the air in a continuous vibration like a severe storm raging. And that's just a verbal cue of what it was like to stand here on Benner's Hill. Now, I put this artillery limber up there for a story. That limber empty weighs 185 pounds. That limber full weighs 650 pounds, which means there's about 375 pounds of gunpowder and iron inside that limber. Now I'm going to share a story with you. You know, we think about combat wounds as far as like being shot, bayoneted, whatever. This is a story of a guy who was lazy and paid the price for it. Here we go. Corporal Thompson was engaged during the firing in detail out ammunition from the caisson. He was rather careless as to close the lid of the box immediately after extracting a round. He was warned it by his comrades that were running great risk. His reply was, nothing's going to happen to old Sam. Sam's going to Baltimore. A few seconds later, after he uttered these words with a light and a joyful heart, a shell exploded in close proximity to his caisson, scattering sparks in every direction, some of which fell into the open limber box, causing it to explode in a sheet of flame, a terrific report, and all over in a flash of lightning. As the smoke drifted away, the caisson was revealed in a wrecked condition. Spindles of the axle twisted, wheels shattered and warped, ammunition boxes reduced to splinters and whirled out of sight. A few black and burned fragments scattered around of the horses, frantic, some wounded, tangled in their harness. A few yards away from the scene of destruction was a form lying prone upon the ground, clothes scorched, smoking, burnt, head divested of a cap and exposing a bald, denuded head where a full shock of hair used to be, whiskers singed off skin, eyebrows, eyelids denuded. Was he breathing? No. It was the body of Corporal Thompson. And so there's lots of ways of dying in Gettysburg. And I took this from the cyclorama to represent that visual. And so this is one of those places, three of us had been there. If you go there, it's an amazing story and I think worth our time. And there's way more than just what I'm sharing with you. So that's Benner's Hill. Great place to watch sunsets too, if you like sunset watching. So now we're going to move to Culps Hill. With the little round top closures, the Park Service is kind of pushing the interest level towards Culps Hill. After the battle, Culps Hill was actually a more popular tourist attraction because there was physical proof of the battle. There were trenches, there were shattered trees, there were Confederate burial trenches. There was a lot there to see. Well, over the 100 years, things have changed. This is approximately what it looked like after the battle. Pretty open, don't you think? And this is a famous painting of the Federal troops. So, quick history of Culps Hill. Union 12th Corps occupies it. At one point, the entire 12th Corps is moved off to the south to support the fighting in the wheat field and the peach orchard, minus one brigade under General Greene. General Greene's brigade holds off on July 2nd. July 3rd, the entire 12th Corps comes back, and there is desperate fighting. In fact, the longest fighting of the Battle of Gettysburg, about 7 hours. They figured about 1 million rounds of ammunition was fired at Culps Hill during that time. This was a place of intense fighting. But for you and I going there just a few years ago, it looked like this. You remember that? It was kind of hard to understand what was happening, wasn't it? It felt like the Union position was a planet away from the Confederate attack. Well, this is, by the way, the monument to the 137th New York under Colonel Ireland. I think they're a fascinating story. We all know the story of the 20th Maine, and they've earned their right in history. The 137th draws an odd parallel. So they are the far right flank of the Army of the Potomac, whereas the 20th was the far left flank. They were outnumbered. They were outflanked. At one point, they too ran out of ammunition. At one point, one of their companies charged bayonets to buy the rest of the regiment time. So it's a very parallel story to our 20th Maine. In fact, even the casualty numbers are very similar. The 137th lost 40 killed, 87 wounded, 10 missing. The 20th Maine, 29 killed, 91 wounded, 5 missing. So you can see it's a great story that a lot of us don't remember or don't pay time to until now. So 137th. There was a gentleman from California, plus the Gettysburg Foundation, plus others, who ponied up the money to clear about 18 acres of Culps Hill. You can see it in the shaded in area. Now, as a student of the battle, standing here 3 years ago, I couldn't have seen any of this. But now when you go there, you can see how tough it was for the Confederates to take that hill. You know, when you look at the history, like, why didn't the Confederates take it on July 2? They were outnumbering the Federals by 3-1, or whatever the number was. When you look at the land, when you look at the lay of the Federal position, it was a tough nut to crack. And now, thanks to the benefactors, these 18 acres are completely clear. And here's what it looks like now. Big difference from that your previous photograph. Now you can walk the route of those North Carolinians or the 1st Maryland CS or the whatever Virginia from Witcher's Brigade. You can understand. This is the famous Forbes painting representing that. Here's Forbes Rock. And when you stand behind Forbes Rock and you realize that they were getting fire from 3 directions, you can see how, again, it was a tougher nut to crack for those Confederates than the numbers may indicate. So if you get to Gettysburg, highly recommended. If not, hopefully this helps you understand some of the concept of Culps Hill. All right? This is just a really cool story. So, here on July 1st, as 1st and 11th Corps are retiring, the units are decimated. The 6th Wisconsin musters only 65 guys on the evening of July 1st. The 2nd, 45 guys. Company I, the 2nd Wisconsin, had 9 men in it. And that was the largest company in the regiment at that point. The 24th Michigan had 99 guys. This was a decimated collection of Union soldiers ordered to defend that big hill that becomes very important later on. So there's a nice addition here, the 7th Indiana. This is the monument to the 7th Indiana. You can see the big tower there. So Ira Grover's in command of the 7th. He is down near Emmitsburg. His regiment has been assigned guard duty for the wagon trains. He decides he's not waiting. He decides to march toward battle, breaking the rules, breaking his orders, and comes up. We think about on July 1st, when most of the regiments have been decimated, his is a fresh regiment with full cartridge boxes. So where do they put him? At the place of potential conflict. Now, remember Richard Ewell's comment? Take the hill if practicable. He takes 23 guys from the 25th Virginia under a lieutenant, and they are ordered to go to the top of Culps Hill to see if the Federals are on that hill. They do that very same thing. Now I'm going to share with you the story of the 7th Indiana. Here we go. The hour was about 11 o'clock. Sergeant Hussey and Private Harshberger were on the extreme right pickets. See those 2 little dots right there? I can take no credit for this map, by the way. I borrowed it. As a noise was heard as of men moving cautiously in the timber some distance to our right, as we advanced to investigate before the enemy discovered us, we got behind some obstructions, permitting the officer of the party to pass us, when Sergeant Hussey dashed out and seized the officer, while Harshberger fired upon the advancing body of troops. Other members of our company running up poured in such a rapid fire that the enemy turned and fled, leaving some prisoners in our hand. I love this stuff. So you guys have to apologize for this, but if the 7th Indiana hadn't been there, would that detail have seen an empty Culps Hill? Would they have reported to Ewell that that hill is clear? And if the Confederates got on Culps Hill, they owned the Baltimore Pike. Ira Grover broke orders, was called up on charges for it, and admonished because of what he'd done. Did he save the day? And if you think about that, go to the 7th Indiana marker, think about Ira Grover and what happened there on Culps Hill. So I think this is a fascinating story about those little what-if moments. Remember these guys? 147th Pennsylvania, how I started my lecture not too long ago. The 147th was part of Geary's division. Now they marched off on July 2nd, chased around a bit and came back, and they fought here. I thought I wanted to do something a little different with the 147th. I've shared a number of battle accounts. You have that. What happened on July 3rd? The 2 armies had separated. There wasn't any dramatic fighting. So as evening sets, what were those soldiers doing? What were they thinking about? Well, I have an account for you. This comes from Captain Moore. Previous quote came from him. It was 10 o'clock. The silent tramp of guards was all that could be heard in that distant timber corner of Culps Hill, when a stalwart captain of the 147th suggested to the other that we go down to Gettysburg and hunt up some refreshments. Swinging his haversack over his shoulder, he was soon lost to sight among the thick trees and blackness of night. 2 hours elapsed, and it was after midnight. Both great armies lay quietly sleeping, save the weary pickets, whose caution required watchfulness and vigilance. Suddenly, the daring forager darted out from the dark intermingling trees and laid down his haversack. He found every hotel and private home in town closed, but gained admission to a solitary drugstore. Carefully, he drew out 3 packages. Were they meat? Pies? No. Only 1 bottle of plantation bitters, 1 bottle of Mischler's bitters, and 1 bottle of Hostetler's bitters. And I had 2, and there are the bottles. Now, not the actual, that's what they, so this guy went into town to find some food, found some bitters. Bitters were like the cure-all back then, probably alcohol laced for all we know. Okay, so that's what he brought back. The story gets even better. Rain. At this early hour of the morning began to pour down in torrents, and the two took shelter in their 3 by 4 foot dog tent, sampling alternately the different qualities of the bitters until the sun rose beautifully on the morning of July 4th. And so there's at least one soldier's account of what these fellas did the night after the battle. I just think that's an amazing story. And can't you just see it? Yeah. All right. I want to go back to someplace familiar and hopefully shed a little different light on it. Of course, here's the cyclorama version. Here's the thing. Some gentlemen mentioned, you said you walked Pickett's charge, sir? So you walked all the way across the field. You know the pathway. I would like to talk about something different. These are the two markers for the 106th Pennsylvania. Now, the 106th Pennsylvania were members of the Philadelphia Brigade. They're the ones that bore the brunt of that July 3rd attack. In fact, the 69th Pennsylvania refused its 3 right companies and it hammered into Armistead survivors that crossed over the small wall. But I don't want to go there. I would like to talk about July 2nd. Company A and B of the 106th served right here by the Cadore Farm. There's the Emmitsburg Pike. Now, one thing cool about the 106th Pennsylvania, that was not their original name. Their first name was the 5th California. At the beginning of the war, the western states wanted to provide support for the Union cause, but to get men and supplies 3,000 miles across the wilderness was impossible. So they sent Governor Baker of Oregon to Washington City to ask if they could raise a brigade in California's name. He was given that commission in April of 61. He goes to Philadelphia. He musters an entire brigade, their original name called the California Brigade. Well, that quickly changes to the Philadelphia Brigade. But this 106 was formerly the 5th California. So on July 2nd, they're here. All this fighting is taking place here. A.R. Wright's Georgia Brigade will be the last assault in this area. 1,400 Georgians will charge across the exact same ground as Pickett and Armistead and those guys did the next day. They actually cross the Emmitsburg Pike. They push the 2 companies back and others. They get inside the copse of trees. They capture 3 guns from the 1st Rhode Island Battery B. They are in the copse of trees. They are there. The only problem is the next 2 Confederate brigades under Mahone and Posey didn't bother advancing as well. Reinforcements come, they're shoved back. So the Confederates had the copse of trees on July 2. They just couldn't hold them. Now, while that's going on, all of a sudden they hear fighting erupting in East Cemetery Ridge. See how I'm tying the whole thing together? I'm proud of myself right now. The 106th, minus Company A and B, are sent to East Cemetery Ridge to stop that Confederate attack we talked about earlier. Companies A and B and about 50 guys are standing about here. And that's that marker here, of course, the famous copse of trees. On July 3, when the Pettigrew assault takes place, this is where they serve. And so those are 2 monuments to 1 regiment telling 2 different stories, but tremendous stories, don't you think? And so that's a story of Pickett's charge area, maybe with a little different flavor for you. This is probably my favorite monument, only because doesn't he look like he was in the field? When you look at his uniform, it's not that pristine 1880s big mustache look of fine, clean specimens. This guy is wrinkled, he's dirty, and that's why I think it's a fascinating image. And you can't help seeing that when you're driving around, right? It's right by the Bryan farm. In 1891, when this was dedicated, Benjamin Snow gave one of the dedication speeches. And here's what he said about this monument. The fire is of bronze, almost as enduring and indestructible as your fame. He's talking to the survivors. The design represents a skirmisher with cap thrown back from his forehead that his vision may not be obscured. It is erected on the spot where your colors stood during Pickett's charge, where 4 color bearers grandly gave up their lives in their defense. At this point, where the onslaught was the heaviest, where the combat was the fiercest, where the slaughter was the greatest, at the point where the onrush of the rebellion was rolled back, baffled, crushed, defeated, we dedicate this monument. So right there, the 111th lost 4 color bearers on that spot. There's more. I want to leave you with something just to kind of close this whole thing out. Traditional thinking is the Confederates were aiming towards the famous copse of trees. There's a bit of a counter debate about was it the copse of trees or Ziegler's Grove, which we'll talk about in a second. If you're standing by if you're Lee, which is an easier target to visually pick? A few trees or this entire grove? And don't forget, this entire grove is on the backside of East Cemetery Ridge. So I'm not going to have a debate about that, but the Mr. Snow of the 111th had a very specific attitude about this. He felt that the focus of the Confederate attack was not way over here with those silly Philadelphians, but over here against good, stout New Yorkers. And so he says that in his account. Here's what he says. We were fierce for the fight. They were fierce for the wrong. The main point of the attack, it seemed to be, was Ziegler's Grove, just on your right and rear. The great crowding of the attacking party seemed to be from the right to the left, showing conclusively that Ziegler's Grove was the point aimed at. The largest number of killed and wounded was in our immediate front. The greatest number of prisoners came in the lane to your right. When the smoke had cleared and the gallant Pickett and his heroic followers had vanished from your front, the great Battle of Gettysburg had become history. The high tide of the rebellion had been reached, and the fate of the Confederate States of America was sealed. So I'm going to support his argument, just be a devil's advocate. If you know about Pickett and Pettigrew's attack, Pettigrew, which had been on the left side, marched straight. Pickett's division kept saddling over to the left. If the copse of trees was a focal point, wouldn't Trimble have been sliding to the right and Pickett attacking straight up? You can play with that all you want. And there's the sunset of my presentation because I like being cheesy. I hope you enjoyed it, folks. Any questions at all? That was fun.